Welcome back to another edition of the Buffalo Fatherhood Initiative podcast. Happy New Year's to you. This is our first one, 24. Somebody said the other day, more in 24. So we hoping to have a lot more of something. I don't know. Anyways, I got my man Sherman here. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
What's good, everybody? Sherman Webb Middlebrooks, a lifelong Buffalo resident, full-time black man. Thank you all again for joining us for another dope conversation. And yeah, we got our other co-host here on the couch with us too. Go ahead and introduce yourself, good brother.
Daniel Robertson, good to see everybody again. Like Antoine said, more than 24, this the Mamba year.
Okay. And we got a special guest with us today. I was going to let one of you guys introduce him, and I lost my train of thought.
The man who needs no introduction, Mr. Mark Scott.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm used to Josetta's son, right, most of the time. But yeah, Mark Scott with the Oishei Foundation, and native of Western New York, originally from Niagara Falls, but proudly call myself a Buffalonian now. So good to be with you, brothers.
Nice. Glad you could make it.
Of course.
When I first asked you, I didn't know whether or not you were going to say yes or not. I'm like, I don't know about your accent.
Why would I not say yes?
No, it's me. It's a personal problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it's me.
The one thing though that I find doing these interviews, especially like in community, like you always got to wonder like who's showing up. So like, is it just Mark showing up, the brother from Niagara Falls who called Buffalo home, or is it Mark from Oishei? You know what I'm saying? So like, that's why, I know for me personally, it's kind of a challenge to figure out how to introduce somebody, because we don't know how folks want to sit down and show up. Maybe you just want to be Mark kicking it with the fellas, not wearing that hat. So we kind of want to leave it up to you to be able to decide how you want to show up today, brother.
You know, I'll tell you, when I was interviewing with Oishei, they asked me kind of a question around that same spirit. I said, I'm just a regular dude from Niagara Falls, New York. That's what you're gonna get every single day. Like, I don't know how to be, anyone else, right? Because I like to believe, especially when you get around your people, they can tell who you are. And so, yeah, I'm just Mark from Niagara Falls. So we can talk about anything you want to talk about.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, if it's uncomfortable for me, which most things aren't, we'll figure out how to navigate around those things. I'm just a regular dude from the Falls.
We got you. We never lost a patient on the podcast so far.
Okay,
I feel like
good to
not
hear.
yet.
100%, huh? Okay, gotcha.
Wait, so Mark, you bring up an interesting point. And seeing that you do work for the Oishei Foundation, before I even get into the question I want to ask you, can you just talk a little bit about the work that you do at Oishei?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I lead two what I like to believe are really important functions at the foundation. One is our capacity building practice. Essentially, it's the consulting practice arm of the foundation, and I do everything that's necessary to help nonprofits do what they do better. And so that might mean doing sort of board development work, right? And I can tell you there's a lot of board development work that needs to happen. To refereeing shouting matches between board chairs and executive directors, to the more fundamental aspects of infrastructure development for nonprofits. So say, for example, a finance and administration function is going awry, right? I'll go in myself or with consultants to diagnose what's happening and then come up with a plan to remedy the issues long term. And so I do all of that capacity building work. And then on the other side, and if this was the only thing I had to do, I would be in heaven, and it's our leadership development work. And so our most important effort in that space is our Oishei Fellowship for Leaders of Color, of which both of these gentlemen are part of.
Yes, sir.
So I do that work. Our community conversations for leaders of color work I also lead. So those are the two things that I do at the foundation. Now, that might be changing to some extent because we're going through a change in our strategic direction. But if I have it my way, I'll just be adding to my portfolio with some staff to help me manage it, and I'll be retaining the things that I do now.
Well, I think I can speak for myself and a whole lot of other people. We hope that you get the chance to continue to add to that portfolio and not necessarily take away from it. Yeah. Going back to that original point that you made about showing up as just a regular dude and just showing up as Mark Scott, talk about how difficult or how challenging that may be especially being a male of color in philanthropy?
Mhm. Well, the first thing I would say is that there's not a whole lot of us,
Right.
right? Starting first at the funder level, right? I do know there's a good brother that's leading the Rochester Area Community Foundation, and I believe he just ascended to that top position. But that's not the case here in Western New York. And so, for the most part, they're either led by a white man or a white woman. That's just what it is. And I don't care how large or small the funder is. That's the case. And there's a sprinkling of us, whether we're talking about black men or black women. But since you were talking about black men, it's almost, we're almost absent, right? So it's a challenge, right? Because, when you go into these spaces, sometimes, I tend to ask myself, where are we? We're getting lost, right? We're getting lost in our communities. We're getting lost at foundation level. We're getting lost at nonprofits. And so I always want to do more, but it's a concern. So I have to show up and I'm cognizant of making sure I say things with my chest, right? and emphasize. We must also talk about black men. We can't leave black men out.
Speaking of black men, you guys over at Oishei were one of the first larger funders to get involved with Buffalo Prenatal about 6 years ago to fund the fatherhood initiative. And that really helped to initiate a lot of what we do today. And so, I have a lot of appreciation to the foundation for that. That was my first introduction to understanding how grants worked and all those things. And so you guys have been really supportive. And I know that you've also supported the Breaking Barriers program over at SAES. So.
Yeah, good. No, I appreciate that. All of that work predates me, but our entire team, they've been really good at listening to organizations, making sure they have a full grasp of the scale of the concerns out in our community and being as responsive as possible. But we also recognize that we need to do more, right? And so I think this is what really has brought us to where we are today in terms of our new direction.
I wasn't thinking about this before, but as you continue to talk, I'm thinking about this question around, I think sometimes smaller folks in a community who are starting up nonprofits, like I need a grant, need this or that, to get started, and they don't necessarily always understand all of the intricacies around what it takes to be funded or this, that, and the third. Can you speak a little bit to, somebody who's just starting, they got a passion to do something in the community, it could be on the east side of Buffalo, wherever. Can you speak to what are some of the key elements needed, whether it be things around leadership and whatever, to put themselves in a position to attract a foundation like Oishei?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first response to that question is that what we have experienced in the nonprofit space is no different than what people of color, particularly black folks, have experienced in the for-profit side, right? And so we've gone underinvested in for many, many years, and we've been held to a higher account, a higher standard than our white brothers and sisters. That's a fact. No one will dispute that. And so that's wrong. So nonprofits, whether you're a nonprofit or you are a grassroots level nonprofit and you've been around for a while, we've had that sort of unfair experience in our community, right? So I think we need to acknowledge that. The second thing that I would say is when you're starting a nonprofit, you have to ask yourself, am I just starting this nonprofit to deal with the issues in front of us for today, or do I want to be around forever, right? And so if you want to be around forever, you really have to prioritize getting your house in order, right? You're building your sort of foundation. As a people, we've been so close to the issues that we immediately want to go to the programming. We immediately want to over-invest in the program without thinking about sort of the back end foundational aspects of the organization, right? Just making sure that, all of the business aspects. We got 990s filed, and we got a good sustainability plan. We know how we're financed. We have good, strong bylaws that we're following. We have a good, highly functioning, healthy board, people with deep competencies, not my brother and my mama and my sister and my aunt on my board. Right. Not to say that we can't have them on our boards, but they need to bring the competencies that are going to be helpful for the organization. And then at the same time, you want people at that, particularly at the board level, who understand what it means to be a board member. And so what I would say is that prioritize the building blocks for your nonprofit. That might mean we have to slow down just a bit. Mm-hmm. And I know that's difficult, right? Because the issues are barreling down on our communities, and we want to be responsive, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. We got people that are returning home, and we want to help them, get into productive lifestyles. We see the issues in our education system. All of those things we want to be responsive to. But I assure you, our organizations won't be around for the long term if we don't prioritize getting our sort of foundational house in order first. Mm-hmm. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I like that. And I think like what you're offering is a skill set that we don't hear a lot. So I know me personally, I always say I like doing the people work, not so much the paperwork. Like, give me the people, find me somebody.
But what I will say, though,
always a place for that
along
person.
Those lines, though, is that, again, going back to my first point, we have unfairly presented paperwork that is unnecessary for people of color at nonprofits. And so we have to figure out how to do a better job, right, with respect to that at the funder level. Right, and in making sure that where possible that we can institute trust-based philanthropical practices.
Yeah. You were also talking too just about board development as part of like some of the work that you do now. I've been on a few boards. I've been asked to be on some other boards. Yep. Been on about 3 boards. I still don't know what it means to be a board member. I just show up when you ask me to show up. I answer whatever questions you present to me, and I attend whatever event you ask me to attend to. It's part of my responsibilities, and if it's some dues, I'll kick in my piece. But other than that, like, I don't know, like, really what I'm supposed to do or why I'm even being asked to be a board member. So, like, what does it mean to be a board member? What makes a good board member? What is a board of directors? A lot of people don't know.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you're asking it. I think the first thing that you want to understand as a board member, when someone asks you to serve, is that when you come onto a board, number one, the organization doesn't belong to any one person. Essentially, the organization belongs to the public, and you as a board member are being entrusted with safeguarding the public's interest in that organization, right? So that's one. Number two, and number three. Number three is you are accountable for the activities of that organization. So if something goes wrong, the state is coming for you. The feds are coming for you, not the CEO, not the CFO, well, depending upon how egregious the offense is, right? Not the director of facilities. It is you who regulatory authorities trust with the assets and the public's interest of that organization. And so what does that mean, right? What does that mean in practice? That means certainly you got to show up for meetings, you got to read the minutes, you got to ask questions, right? You got to get involved. Right? So whether it's the finance committee or the audit committee or the governance committee, right? Read your bylaws, so you got to know about what's happening in the enterprise. But if I can leave you with anything, with respect to everything that I said, is you have to understand is that as a board member, it's your responsibility to protect the public's interest in that organization. Right, and you can't just leave it to the CEO or the executive director. No, it doesn't matter how much you love that person, how well you know that person, how much you think you trust that person. You have to remember is that the regulatory authorities and the public is counting on you to safeguard their interests in that nonprofit organization.
I appreciate
good.
that answer. That was helpful.
Yeah.
A follow-up question around this board. when you're making a decision, if someone comes to you and asks you to join their board, what are some of the things that you think about as an individual or look at to determine whether or not you are willing to, join that particular board?
There's a few things, and this is just sort of what's top of mind for me, and this isn't sort of the end-all be-all list. Number one, as a person of color, I want to know that there are other people of color on that board.
Very important.
Let's start there.
Very, very, very important, because one, I don't want to be anyone's token, right? And two, that will demonstrate for me that this organization is one that appreciates both the diversity of thought and culture, right? So two very important things. The second thing that I would say is that I want to know what I'm walking into, right? So to the extent that you can get access to them beyond the 990s, I want to know about the fiscal health of the organization, right? So I want to know about your balance sheet year to date. I want to know about your P&L year to date. I want to know about your current statement of cash flow, like how much money you got on hand. You don't know if you're walking into a burning building, right? Because as a board member, right, you got to say, okay, what do I need to know? How do I need to, participate on this particular organization? Do I have the skills, or do I even have the time, right? Because if you're walking into an organization and the house is on fire, right, and you got to get a rescue plan in place, well, you need more than just sort of a passive board member. You need somebody that's going to show up at a moment's notice, be prepared for emergency meetings. So I think you want to have a good handle on the fiscal health of the organization. Two last things. The next is you want to know about leadership at that organization, right? You want to know about who's running the enterprise, the executive director, the CFO, and you want to just ask, you like the person or not like the person, right? You want to know about this person's performance. Yeah. How well are they performing on the qualitative side of the enterprise, managing the people, and then on the other side, do they do a good job of managing the business? And then the final thing I would say is that do you as a potential board member, do you have passion for the work, right? Because any of us can be on boards, but do you have passion for the work, right? Do you love Save the Whales Inc., right? And do you love hot dogs and milkshakes Inc., right? And do you love A5A, right? Of course we know that the answer to that, right? So that's the final thing that I would say is that are you going to show up having passion about the mission and vision of the work of the nonprofit?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, that's a good question.
I feel like you need to be out here giving some Board 101
class.
Yeah, put you on to some folk here.
Yeah, listen, wherever I can help, I'm all about it.
So I did have one more follow-up question. I don't want to take up too much time.
Sure.
But while I got you here, so you said like the nonprofit space. So like there is money in the nonprofit space.
It's different. It's nonprofit and not-for-profit.
Okay.
Two different ones.
Break that down for us.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stop there.
Well, generally speaking, nonprofits can make money. They can make lots of money.
Okay.
Right. So long as the surplus dollars and certainly the revenue is related to its mission. Okay. Right. So let's say, for example, you Save the Whales Inc., right? And so you're all about preserving an environment where whales can thrive. But all of a sudden you say, there's casinos popping up all over the place, right? Like, you want to figure out how to get into the casino business. Well, that's not what you want to do. Although the law might permit you to be able to do that, you might trigger UBIT, unrelated business income tax, and that's not what you want, right? So you want to kind of stay in that space where you're creating related entities and getting into related business activities that even if they're making significant surplus dollars that you can justify, right? So you can make lots of money so long as you stay within your mission on nonprofits. Not-for-profits are not supposed to make money or significant surplus. So the dollars you make essentially are supposed to go back into the business, back into the enterprise. So they should be as close to break even as possible. Doesn't mean that you got to be, operating on fumes, but not for profits, right? Would imply, just as the name says, right, is that we're operating it not to make a profit, right? And so we're reinvesting all of the dollars, or at least as many of the dollars as possible back into the enterprise so that we can continue to operate.
So where does the money come from? That was the second part to my question. So when folks have foundations and institutions that are like philanthropic, like where does the money come from? That like that's part of these grants that people are applying to.
Yeah. So there's two things. Most nonprofits operate off of two forms of income: contributed income or earned income. Contributed income usually comes in the form of grants. I mean, an organization is contributing, right, some form of financial resource to, to a nonprofit, right? So that could come in the form of a grant from a funder like Oishei. That could come in the form of an individual donation from Daniel, right? He's going to write you a check for $50,000 because he likes the work.
I wish. We ain't there yet.
Yeah, that could come from a corporate donation, right? So that's contributed income or earned income. Let's say, for example, and I ran a couple nonprofits, right? So let's say, for example, the one I ran in Las Vegas. So we were a really, really big workforce development corporation, preparing people to go into jobs in casinos. And so they come through our programs, and if they were waiting for jobs, and some did, or some very few didn't get hired, or we need to do some additional training. And so what we would do is go out and establish contracts with area entities. So, for example, one contract we had was with an organization called the Smith Center. It would be the equivalent to our Shays. And so we contract with them to provide all hospitality services. So the students that came through our organization, we would provide sort of the hospitality services, and we would earn revenue, right, for that. So that's an earned income strategy related to my nonprofit.
Is that similar to like a fee for service type of deal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is. And for a lot of nonprofits, that's taboo, right? They feel like, well, we should be doing what we're doing for free or for the community.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that increasingly organizations are really needing to come up with a much better balanced, higher quality revenue stream with respect to earned income and contributed income.
Yeah.
I always say Dr. King, Malcolm X didn't get them speeches for free.
Absolutely.
They had families.
Absolutely. And we really need to get out of that sort of mindset and really start to think about how we can come up with fee for service strategies to lead our organization.
I think from my perspective,
Yep.
I've only been in this sector for a short period of time, but from working in this area, it seems to be this narrative that if I have a fee for service model, that somehow I'm doing my people a disservice.
Yeah,
somehow I'm evil, or again, this is just a narrative. And as you were describing the whole nonprofit, like back end stuff, like there's a lot of business aspects of it, right? Like someone who has a business mind, I think will really thrive, and even a non-profit, not-for-profit sector, because there's a lot of things that folks have to understand as it relates to sustaining and all of the pieces that you talked about. And so I think, again, that this whole false narrative that you shouldn't have a fee for service or whatever is somehow wrong, when that might be the very thing that we need to be more creative around thinking about.
Absolutely, and there's a couple of reasons why I think it's going to become a strategic imperative for nonprofits, particularly ones that are serving our community. Why it's important for us to think about these earned income strategies. Number one, ARPA money is dried up, so all the money that's come about as a result of COVID it's drying up, and many of our nonprofits pivoted to doing COVID response work, right? And so now that the emergency has been declared over, those funds are dried up. And so organizations have been living off those dollars, right, with no through cycle plan. So what happens when we get on the other side of COVID? If you were struggling before COVID, you're really struggling now. right? So that's the first piece, right? The second piece is there ain't a whole lot of money coming through philanthropy here in Western New York, right? You got Wilson, right? They're the largest, right? But they're spend down. And so that's the way their charter was organized when they were first created, right? And so their dollars that came about as a result of the sale of the bills went to a fund, right, that has to be spent down, I don't know, it was 20 or 25 years. We're about halfway there. Yep. That's number one. The other piece of that is that those dollars have to be distributed between Michigan and Western New York. So Southern Michigan and Western New York. And so there's still a lot of money over there. And so then there's Community Foundation, there's Oishei, and then Western New York and everyone else. But if you compare what hits the street here in Buffalo versus say a Boston or New York City, in LA, San Diego, heck, many places in California, Chicago, it pales in comparison. So there's not a lot of money that hits the streets here. And so the slices of the pie are just getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. So we have to do two things. We have to, one, look outside of Western New York, right? And so if our mission is compelling enough, someone else out there will fund it. And two, to your point, we do have to start thinking about earned income strategies.
Yeah. We getting close to the end, and we oh, did you ask him?
No, I was going to kind of pivot towards that because I was going to ask something more related to like men and fatherhood and why don't men show up and do this kind of work? And so I've been trying to like answer that question for myself, like giving your responses, and I'm still not sure if I've arrived at my own personal conclusion. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to pivot too far off of that unless Brother Antoine think we got time.
Oh, wait. You got it? Yeah, good.
Yeah, you tell me.
Okay, cool,
I got time if you don't got time.
So why don't men get into this nonprofit, not-for-profit sector as often? Because in my experience, I think more of us have that entrepreneurial kind of spirit. And I think there are handcuffs that are sometimes placed on you in this work, with related to like the mission and the people who are funding you and not upsetting them. And I think a lot of times some men shy away from that. That's just my personal opinion. You're much closer to it than I am. So I'm just curious your thoughts of why men don't show up, not just black men.
Well, a couple things. Number one, I mean, if you consider the historical influences of philanthropy, historically, philanthropic work, social services work has been labeled as women's work, right? And so I just think over the years, society hasn't made it safe for us to reconsider, right, sort of who's doing the work, right, and the titles associated with it. So I just think, and this is true of other sectors, not just nonprofit. And so I think we still have some work to do to sort of shake the stereotypes around who does nonprofit work, who does social services work, and who's best equipped to do that work. So I think that's the first piece, and the other piece is, look, we as men, as black men, this is a safe space. We can talk, right? We have to ask ourselves, where are we in our communities, right? Where are we in our households? Where are we in businesses? Where are we in the communities? And so it's hard, brother. I mean, It is, right? But we can count on one hand the amount of black men leading nonprofits here in Western New York. Yeah. We can count on no hands the amount of black men leading, mainstream for-profits here in Western New York, right? And so what we are experiencing in terms of leadership or just the presence in nonprofits, that's just a microcosm of where we are in terms of our presence across many sectors.
Right.
And so I just think, as men, we need to get together and have a conversation about that. We need to commit to seeing something different, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. All right. Oh, that's good. All right, as we wrap up, we got a couple things coming up this month that we gotta promote, for lack of better words. Dan, you want to talk about the activities we got coming up this weekend, and then the boxing piece?
Yeah. So this Saturday, we are going to be working out with G Cope Fitness, Gentino Copeland, doing some workouts over there, the fitness boot camps this Saturday. And then we'll be launching the mental wellness boxing sessions over at Bomb Squad Center, right?
Yeah, Flair Center. Yeah.
Also known as the Flair Center.
Mhm.
Those will be starting next week.
Mhm.
And then we have a mentoring and mental health awareness event coming up in February.
Yeah.
And then we're doing a piece with the mayor and the Men's Summit in March. So busy over the next couple months.
You just gonna give it all to them.
I mean, feel free to stop me at any time.
Yeah. The other thing that we got coming up is Nurturing Fathers cohort. I don't know what cohort this is number, but on, I believe it's January the 20th or the 30th. The 30th, we start the next cohort for this year. So if you are interested in growing as a father or caregiver, you got some nephews or something you're watching over, feel free to plug into that. We'll put the link in the show notes or whatever it is that they call it. Any last minute words?
I thought you guys were going to ask me something about my kids.
Well, we were, but we ran out of time.
Yeah, we ran out of time, so you got to come back. Because
Okay, of course.
Yeah.
Well, there's just one quick thing. We do Keep Toss ad. We do that at Nurturing Fathers.
Okay.
Keep Toss ad is something that you would keep from your father and the relationship that you had with your father. For some of us, we didn't really have much of a relationship, so that's sometimes that's hard to do. What we would toss. So for me, it's always like the verbal abuse, physical abuse toward my mother, stuff like that. And then what we would add, right, like something that is like this. I need to incorporate this in a way in which I raise my kids.
Keep from just fatherhood in general, whether it's me or my father.
Well,
or just,
that you would keep. What would it keep? Yeah, the thing that you would keep that you learned from your dad. Yep, or that you saw.
Well, my mom raised us by herself.
Okay.
Right. So my mom was married twice. My father was me and my brother Jason, and then she tried it again, and she had 3 kids. So both of them were just they brought a lot of trauma onto the family. Okay. And I like to believe, just knowing what I know about them, that they were undergoing their own trauma in dealing with their own pain. Mm-hmm. But my mother is my mother, mm-hmm. and they did not treat her well. Yeah. And so, as the oldest of 5, I witnessed firsthand, certainly when my mom was married to her second husband and that was unwinding, just terrible levels of verbal abuse. Terrible levels of verbal abuse. And so in my own relationships, I do everything I can not to be in a position to say something mean, say something that I can't take back. Yeah. Right. So I would certainly toss that. I can't say there's much that I would keep from those situations. What I would add is, just a greater sense of love and respect, right? And so I try to do that, and as sometimes as difficult as it is for me as a co-parent, because it ain't perfect, yep. Right? It's always important to center those things, love and respect.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was nice and neat for you, but
that's your journey.
It was real, man. Yeah. That was just you shared how you kind of came up. I guess for me, because I've seen you light up when you talk about your daughter. So just
that's all we gonna talk about when I come back.
So that's like the beauty of this conversation. As the older I get, and talking about like which version of you is showing up. Yeah. So like I'm always like a dad, but like I'm not always in dad mode. Sometimes like I'm just a man. Yeah. Right. And so when you showed up today, whenever the guests sit down, personally in my mind, I'm like, am I gonna lean more into like the manhood questions or more in like the fatherhood questions? Yeah. And you just gave us so many gems about being a man and navigating this nuanced kind of space that like I kind of just was like, personally, I'm gonna ask all these manhood questions again as a younger brother trying to get advice, because you've been places that I'm trying to go to. So I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit, but we gotta have you come back and talk a little bit more about the father version of you.
I'm here whenever you need me.
Appreciate you for sure. Sure, you want to close us out?
Yeah, man. So thank you again for joining us for another conversation here on the Buffalo Fatherhood Initiative podcast. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this with folks and continue the conversation down in them comments, man. We want to see y'all thoughts and y'all opinions as y'all follow along with us here on the podcast. So again, and I'm going to steal from my hero, the great Jerry Springer. All y'all out there, y'all take care of yourselves and each other.